I was still in my scrubs when I ran through those courthouse doors. My hair was half falling out of the bun I'd thrown together in the hospital parking lot. I had surgical tape on my left thumb from where I'd nicked myself on a retractor blade, and I was still wearing the paper shoe covers I'd forgotten to pull off in the O hallway. I remember the sound they made on the marble floor, this ridiculous crinkling, shuffling sound like I was some kind of ghost haunting the wrong building at the wrong time, which, as it turned out, was exactly what I was. The security guard at the front desk looked up at me with this expression I'll never forget, somewhere between pity and discomfort, like he already knew something I didn't. I asked him which courtroom Judge Harmon was in. He pointed down the hall without saying a word, just pointed. And something about the way he did it, slow, almost reluctant, made my stomach drop before I'd even taken a single step in that direction. I pushed through the double doors at the end of the corridor. The room was still full of people, flowers on the table, my mother standing near the back wall with her hand over her mouth, my Aunt Patricia crying into a tissue. And there at the front of the room, standing next to a man I had planned to spend the rest of my life with, was my best friend, Chelsea, in a white dress, holding a small bouquet of peas, the exact flowers I had told her I wanted for my own bouquet. The judge was closing his folder. The certificate was already signed. That's when his mother, Karen, walked straight up to me, looked me dead in the eyes, and smiled. Not a sympathetic smile, a smile like she'd been waiting for this moment for years. "You're too late, sweetheart," she said. "Get out of here." I turned toward the exit. My legs were moving on autopilot. The room was spinning. And then I saw something in the doorway that stopped me cold. But to understand what I saw and why it changed absolutely everything, you need to go back with me. Back to before any of this happened. Back to when my life made sense. My name is Dr. Haley Mercer. I'm a pediatric surgeon at Riverside Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. I grew up in a mid-sized suburb about 40 minutes outside the city, the kind of place where everybody knows your parents and your parents know everybody's business. I was never the most popular girl in school. I was the one in the library during lunch, the one who cried when she got a B+ on a chemistry test, the one who decided at age 12 that she wanted to be a doctor after watching a documentary about open-heart surgery on a 9-year-old boy. Something about that image, a surgeon's hands holding a beating heart, keeping it going, never left me. I got into Ohio State on a full academic scholarship, 7 years of medical school and residency, mountains of student debt that I was still chipping away at, and a fellowship in pediatric surgery that nearly broke me in the best possible way. By the time I was 31, I had my own cases, real ones, kids who came in on gurneys and went home on their own 2 feet because of decisions I made. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying it because that work was the center of my entire identity. It was also, if I'm being honest, the thing that caused me more relationship problems than I could count. I met Brandon Cole at a charity gala for the hospital foundation 3 years ago. He was tall, clean-cut, and had this easy, unforced confidence that I found immediately attractive. He worked in commercial real estate, not flashy, not a show-off, just solid and steady. He brought me a glass of sparkling water without being asked, because he'd noticed I was the only one at the table not drinking. That was it. That was the moment I thought, this one's different. We dated for 8 months before he asked me to move in. We split everything down the middle. Rent on his 2-bedroom condo in the short north, groceries, utilities. I liked that. I dated men before who got weird about my salary, who made passive-aggressive comments when I paid for dinner or got awkward when I mentioned my 401k. Brandon never did any of that. He seemed genuinely proud of what I did. He'd introduced me at parties as my girlfriend, the surgeon, with this real warmth in his voice, not the performative kind. His mother, Karen, was another story from day one. Karen Cole was 62 years old and had spent the last 30 of those years deciding that no woman would ever be good enough for her only son. She was a retired school administrator from Westerville
who drove a Buick SUV with a Jesus fish on the back and had opinions about everything. My work schedule, my apartment decor, the fact that I didn't attend church, the fact that I sometimes worked weekends. The very first time I had dinner at her house, she looked at my hands across the table and said, "A woman with hands like that will never make a proper home." I laughed because I thought she was joking. She was not joking. Brandon always brushed it off. "She's just old-fashioned." He'd say, "She does it to everyone." But I noticed she didn't do it to Chelsea. Chelsea Park had been my best friend since sophomore year of college. We'd roomed together for 2 years, been in each other's corners through breakups and board exams and the death of her dad. She was funny and warm and could make anyone feel like the most interesting person in the room. She worked as a marketing director for a tech startup downtown. She was also, I should say, objectively beautiful, the kind of effortless, high-cheekboned beautiful that made people do double takes. I'd always been happy for her. I genuinely had. She deserved good things, and I told her that constantly. Chelsea and Brandon had met through me, obviously. The three of us had hung out together dozens of times. Dinners, weekend trips, the occasional Bengals game.
I never once thought anything of it. Looking back, I can identify the moments I missed. The way she'd touch his arm when she laughed. The way he'd find excuses to text her about checking in on Haley when I was on a long shift. The way Karen would light up whenever Chelsea came around, calling her such a grounded girl and so warm and present as opposed to me. Apparently, Brandon proposed on a Thursday evening in December, right there in our condo kitchen. No grand gesture, just him, a ring box, and a question. I said yes before he finished asking. I cried. He cried. We called our families. My mom called it the best news she'd gotten in years. I put the ring on my finger and walked around our apartment touching things like I was seeing them for the first time, thinking, this is my life now. This is real and good and mine. We set the date for the following October, a courthouse ceremony, just close family and a few friends, followed by a dinner at a private room in a restaurant downtown. It was exactly what I wanted, simple, meaningful, no fuss. I'd seen enough of my colleagues burn out planning elaborate weddings while their relationships quietly collapsed around them. I wanted the marriage, not the event. Chelsea was my maid of honor. She helped me pick out my dress, a simple ivory A-line that I bought for $340 at a bridal shop in Dublin. She sat with me through the alterations appointment. She organized a small bachelorette dinner at a wine bar in the short north. She listened to me go on about venue deposits and guest list politics for months. She was perfect. She was present. She was my person. I should have known that's exactly the kind of woman who can walk into a space you've left empty and fill it completely. The week before our wedding, I was assigned a case that I almost handed off to a colleague. A 6-year-old girl named Marisol, I'll never forget that name, had come in with what her parents thought was a stomach bug. It was not a stomach bug. It was a ruptured appendix with early-stage peritonitis, and if we waited another 12 hours, we were looking at sepsis. I reviewed her scans at 11:00 at night and felt that familiar cold clarity settle over me. This child needed surgery, and she needed it soon. I scheduled her for early the morning of my wedding day. I told Brandon. He paused on the other end of the phone and then said, "Okay, just make sure you're done by noon." The ceremony was at 2. I had 2 full hours of buffer. It was fine. It was completely fine. I should have heard something in that pause, that small, quiet pause before. Okay. The morning of October 14th, I was in the O at 6:45 a.m. The surgery went well for the first 2 hours. Then Marisol's blood pressure dropped. Then we found the secondary perforation we hadn't seen on the imaging. Then the attending anesthesiologist called a complication that required us to stop, stabilize, and restart. By the time I closed, it was 12:40 in the afternoon. I pulled off my gloves, looked at the clock on the wall, and felt my heart slam against my ribs. I called Brandon from the scrub room. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I texted. Surgery ran long. Emergency. I'm leaving the hospital right now. Please wait for me. I love you. I will be there. I grabbed my bag from my locker, still in my scrubs, still with the paper shoe covers on my feet, and I ran. The drive to the courthouse took 45 minutes in midday traffic. I parked in a no-parking zone and left my hazards on. I ran through those double doors at 1:58 p.m., 2 minutes before the ceremony was supposed to start. Except it wasn't starting because, as I would learn from my own mother, trembling in that hallway, Brandon had moved the ceremony up by 30 minutes at Karen's suggestion. Because the judge had another appointment, my mother told me, her voice breaking. That's what Karen told everyone. The ceremony had started at 1:30. It had ended at 1:47. And Chelsea had been standing there the whole time. I stood in the middle of that courthouse hallway, with the fluorescent lights buzzing above me, and the sound of people murmuring, and someone I still don't know who, actually laughing softly in a corner. Karen was walking toward me with that smile, and I turned toward the door because I could not breathe, could not think, could not process the fact that the 2 people I had trusted most in the world had just on the morning I saved a child's life decided my time was up. That's when I saw him standing in the doorway. He was wearing a suit I didn't recognize. He had a manila envelope in his hand, and the look on his face wasn't surprise or awkwardness or the guilty flinch of someone who'd stumbled into the wrong moment. He was looking directly at me with an expression that could only be described as, "I've been waiting for you." His name was Detective Ray Okafor, and I had never met him before in my life. He stepped through the doorway with the kind of calm that belongs to people who've walked into difficult rooms for a living. Late 40s, broad-shouldered with reading glasses folded in his breast pocket, and a blue tie that had seen better days. The manila envelope in his hand was thick, the kind of thick that means someone did a lot of work before they showed up somewhere. "Dr. Haley Mercer," he said. I blinked. My mouth was completely dry. Behind me, I could hear Karen still saying something, but her voice had gone fuzzy and distant, like a TV in another room. "Yes," I managed. "That's me. I'm Detective Ray Okafor with the Franklin County Financial Crimes Unit," he said. "I've been trying to reach you for 3 days. I left 2 voicemails at Riverside Children's Hospital." He glanced past me toward the room I'd just stumbled out of. His expression didn't change, but something moved behind his eyes. "I'm going to need you to step outside with me for a few minutes." Karen's voice cut through. She was just leaving. She appeared at my elbow like she'd materialized out of the floor. That same smile fixed on her face, but her eyes were different now, sharper, calculating. "This is a private family event, and she is not family." Detective Okafor looked at Karen the way you look at a stop sign when you're already planning to go through it, politely, and then past it. "Ma'am," he said, "I wasn't talking to you." He held the door open. I walked through it. We stood in the corridor just outside the courtroom, the marble floor stretching away in both directions, the fluorescent lights still buzzing their indifferent hum above us. My paper shoe covers were still on my feet. I looked down at them and had this bizarre, disconnected thought. I should really take those off. And then Detective Okafor opened the manila envelope, and I forgot about my feet entirely. "Dr. Mercer," he said, pulling out a stack of documents. "How much do you know about Brandon Cole's financial history?" I shook my head slowly. "He's in commercial real estate. He does well. We split everything on the condo, rent, utilities. I didn't dig into his finances because it never seemed necessary. Did you know he was named as a defendant in a civil fraud suit in Delaware County 2 years ago?" I stared at him. No. Did you know he has a judgment against him for $214,000 from a failed real estate partnership in 2021? My legs went cold. No. Detective Okafor laid the papers out with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this many times. There were court filings. There were bank records. There was a name I didn't recognize, a business entity called Cole and Park Ventures, LLC. And when I saw the second name on those formation documents, the room tilted. Park, as in Chelsea Park. Cole and Park Ventures was registered 14 months ago. Detective Okafor said primarily capitalized through a series of wire transfers from a joint account that Mr. Cole opened in October of last year. He paused. Dr. Mercer, did you co-sign any bank accounts with Brandon Cole? I opened my mouth, closed it. There had been a form, a thick stack of papers at a bank branch in Worthington 8 months ago on a Saturday morning. Brandon had said it was refinancing paperwork on the condo. He'd had a pen in my hand before I'd finished reading the first page, and I'd been exhausted from a 40-hour stretch at the hospital, and I had trusted him. I had trusted him completely. I think I did, I whispered. Detective Okafor nodded slowly like he'd been expecting that answer. The account was used as a funding vehicle for Cole and Park Ventures. Over 9 months, approximately $87,000 moved through it. Your name is on the account, Dr. Mercer, which is why we've been trying to reach you to determine whether you were a participant or a victim. I gripped the wall behind me. $87,000. I thought about every extra shift I'd taken, every weekend I'd stayed late, every vacation I'd skipped. I had been building a life. I had been so busy building it that I hadn't noticed someone else had been quietly taking it apart. Victim, I said. My voice was very flat. Definitely a victim. That's what I suspected, he said. I'm going to need your formal statement, but first, and I apologize for the timing, I understand this is a difficult situation. I need you to know that Mr. Cole and Miss Park were scheduled to be served with civil subpoenas today. That's why I'm here. I've been coordinating with the courthouse to execute service. I looked back at the double doors. Brandon was in there. Chelsea was in there. Karen was in there gloating. And they were all about to be served. I straightened up. I peeled the paper shoe covers off my feet one at a time and dropped them in a trash can by the water fountain. I smoothed my scrub top. I took one long breath, and then I said, Detective Okafor, may I walk back in there with you? He considered me for a moment. You can stand in the doorway, he said, but don't say anything until I'm done. I nodded. That was fine. I didn't need to say a word. We went back through the double doors together. The room went quiet the second we walked in. Not the polite, settling kind of quiet. The cold, held breath kind. My mother saw my face, and her hand dropped from her mouth. My Aunt Patricia stopped mid-dab with her tissue. Brandon, who had been standing near the judge's table with Chelsea's hand in his, looked up and saw Detective Okafor's badge on his belt, and the color drained out of his face so fast it was almost medically interesting. Chelsea saw it too. I watched her eyes go from me to the detective, to the envelope in his hand, and I saw the exact moment she understood what was happening. Her grip on Brandon's hand tightened. He pulled his away. Karen stepped forward. She was the only one in the room who still looked composed. Who are you? She demanded. Detective Ray Okafor, Franklin County. He reached into the envelope. I have civil subpoenas for Brandon Allen Cole and Chelsea Marie Park related to an ongoing financial fraud investigation concerning Cole and Park Ventures, LLC. He held out the first document. Mr. Cole. Brandon didn't move. He was looking at me. His expression had collapsed into something I'd never seen on his face before. Not guilt exactly, more like the look of a man who had calculated his risks very carefully and had just discovered he'd gotten the math wrong. "You need to take this, Mr. Cole," Detective Okafor said pleasantly. Brandon took the subpoena. His hand was shaking. Detective Okafor turned. "Ms. Park." Chelsea looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. She was still wearing the white dress. She was still holding my peonies. She took the subpoena and it slipped from her fingers onto the floor, and she had to bend down to pick it up. And when she stood back up, her face was bright red. The room was absolutely silent, except for the sound of Karen making a strange, strangled noise somewhere to my left. Then my Aunt Patricia said loudly and distinctly from the back of the room, "Well, I'll be damned." I almost laughed. I didn't, but I almost did. Detective Okafor turned to me and gave me a small nod. He handed me a business card. "My office will be in touch Monday morning," he said. "You'll want to bring your own attorney. Do you have one?" "I'll have one by Monday," I said. He walked out, and I stood there in the middle of that courtroom in my scrubs with surgical tape on my left thumb, and I looked at Brandon Cole, who had moved the ceremony up 30 minutes so I would miss it, who had signed papers with my name on them without telling me, who had built a business with my best friend, using money that was partly mine. And I said exactly one thing: I hope she was worth it. I didn't wait for an answer. I turned and walked to where my mother was standing. She put her arms around me immediately and I let her. And for exactly 10 seconds, I let myself feel all of it. The exhaustion, the humiliation, the grief for something I had genuinely loved. 10 seconds. Then I stepped back, squeezed her hand, and said, "I'm okay. Let's go." My Aunt Patricia grabbed her purse and fell into step behind us. 3 of the other guests, people I actually knew, people who had come for me, followed. We walked out of that courthouse together, and the door closed behind us, and that was the last time I was ever in the same room as Brandon Cole. The weeks that followed were not clean or simple. Nothing about real life is. I hired a family law attorney named Sandra Greer, a compact, no-nonsense woman out of a firm in Dublin who had the energy of someone who had seen every version of this story and had stopped being surprised by any of them. She made 3 phone calls on my behalf in the first 48 hours. The first was to the bank to have my name formally separated from the joint account and to flag the account activity for the fraud investigation. The second was to the civil attorney working alongside Detective Okafor's unit to make sure my victim status was clearly established in the record. The third was to Brandon's attorney to communicate that I would be pursuing recovery of my contributed assets and that we had documentation going back 14 months. Brandon's attorney called Sandra back within 6 hours, which she told me afterward with a thin smile was the fastest callback she'd received in 11 years of practice. The civil case took 7 months to resolve. I won't go through every motion and counter-motion because honestly living through it the first time was enough. What I will tell you is that by the end, I had recovered $61,000 of the $87,000 that had flowed through that account. Not everything, but enough to matter. Brandon and Chelsea's business venture had predictably collapsed. The investors they'd brought in were furious. 2 of them filed separate suits. Cole and Park Ventures LLC was dissolved by a Delaware County court in the spring. Brandon and Chelsea, and yes, I'm aware of the spectacular irony, filed for divorce 6 months after their courthouse wedding. I heard this through my Aunt Patricia, who heard it from a woman in her book club, whose daughter worked in the same building as Chelsea's old marketing firm. Apparently, the pressure of the investigation had done what love couldn't sustain. I did not feel sorry for either of them. I want to be honest about that. I didn't feel triumphant either. Not really. I felt tired, and then I felt something that slowly over time started to feel like relief. Karen Cole called me once about 3 months after everything came out. She called my cell phone at 9 o'clock in the evening on a Tuesday, and I almost didn't pick up. I did pick up, though, because I wanted to hear what she had to say. She said, I didn't know about the money. I want you to know that. I was quiet for a moment. Then I said, Karen, with respect, I don't think that's actually the thing you owe me an apology for. She was quiet for a very long time. Then she hung up. I put my phone face down on my kitchen counter and made myself a cup of tea and watched the steam rise and thought about all the things I could have said to her over the years and didn't. I decided the silence was better. Marisol went home from the hospital 11 days after her surgery. I was there when her parents wheeled her out. She was wearing a purple sweatshirt with a dinosaur on it, and she had a sticker on her cheek that one of the nurses had given her. Her father shook my hand with both of his hands and couldn't get through a full sentence. Her mother just looked at me and said, "Thank you for staying." She meant for staying in the operating room, but standing there in that hallway in the building where I'd spent that entire impossible day, I thought about all the ways those words applied. Thank you for staying. I stayed. I kept working. I kept showing up at Riverside Children's Hospital at 6:45 in the morning. I kept making decisions that were sometimes wrong and sometimes right, and always real, because that's what the job is. I moved out of the Short North condo. Brandon kept it, which was fine. I never wanted to look at that kitchen again, and found a 2-bedroom apartment in German Village with high ceilings and a good parking situation, and a landlord who fixed things when they broke. I got a dog, a 3-year-old beagle mix named Biscuit, who destroys throw pillows and is absolutely worth it. I don't have a grand conclusion about love or trust, or what it means to be betrayed by people you chose on purpose. What I have is this: I saved a child's life on the worst morning of my life, and I would make that same decision again without hesitation. And that fact tells me everything I need to know about who I actually am. I used to worry that my work made me unavailable, that I was too much of a surgeon to be enough of a person. Brandon certainly implied that in his way. Karen said it directly. Even Chelsea once, after too much wine at a dinner I'd had to arrive 40 minutes late, said, "Haley, you know, sometimes it feels like the hospital is your real relationship." Maybe she was right. Maybe that's not the tragedy I used to think it was, because the morning of October 14th, when everything fell apart, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. My hands were doing exactly what they were built to do, and a little girl in a purple dinosaur sweatshirt got to go home to her family. If you found this story powerful, please hit the like button and share it with someone who needs to hear the truth about boundaries today.